Hey, friends. Welcome to the Raising Boys and Girls podcast. I'm Sissy Goff.
And I'm David Thomas, and we're so glad you've joined us for this conversation. Let's dive in.
Okay, I feel like in this episode, we need some really great background music.
And we have a lot of friends who are amazing creative 4's that could provide that for us.
That is the truth.
Which is a great lead in to talking about this incredible number. I love all the things that 4's offer to our world. And
I've heard someone say how lacking we would be in art and music and beauty if we didn't have 4's, and that couldn't be any truer.
And that's a great place to start. We're going to begin with the incredible strengths of this number, and then we'll talk about some of the struggles or challenges. 4's, you are creative, textured, deep, substantive, attuned. You bring beauty to so many things. You see beauty. You help the rest of us see beauty. You are great storytellers and songwriters. And thinking of how many of our amazing friends who are gifted songwriters are 4's.
Yes.
Was thinking about one that we had on the podcast who, Bear Reinhardt, who we love. Bear has as a part of Need to Breathe and has a great solo project under the name of Wilder Woods, and he has this great song called Someday Soon, and there's a line in that song that always makes me think about 4's. The line is, just because you feel like a stranger, that don't mean you are. Isn't that a good reminder for 4's?
Such a good reminder.
Tell us what else is true about 4's.
Also, you offer profound empathy for the emotional states of others. You are highly intuitive and highly imaginative. You are courageous in your capacity to explore intense feelings and the harder things in life. And was it Suzanne that said, when your dog dies, the person you want to come over the most is a 4?
That's exactly
and that
it.
feels so true. You do. And I had heard a 4 say recently, I'm not afraid of any emotion. And I don't have a timetable on it either.
What a superpower.
They can not just sit with us when we're sad and struggling, but sit and sit and sit. And that is, especially in the midst of grief, it's what we all want. So 4's, you are such a gift to the world and to us in those places.
Another place you're a gift, and something I would argue our world needs more right now than maybe ever before, is that you aren't afraid of complexity, of mystery, or nuance. You aren't afraid to sit in hard conversations.
Yes. And you are so authentic. In fact, authenticity is a core motivation. You desire to be your true, unique self. And that's something I kept thinking about during our episode with Kendra and John is not only are the two of them their unique selves, but it frees you up to be too when you're in the presence of a 4. You value authenticity in yourself and others and are committed to finding genuine meaning and depth in life.
Love that. 4's are often idealistic and romantic, passionate about their pursuits and driven by a desire for profound meaning and connection in all areas of life.
4's have a strong appreciation for aesthetics and the beautiful, often finding inspiration in art, nature, and the poetry of everyday experiences.
4's feel a lot of pressure to create an exceptional life, and that creation is often based on fantasy.
Okay, 4's, hang in there with me. Just remember as we say this, because we're going to talk about how you can struggle with shame. We have talked about the low points of every number, and they are there for every single one of us. Growth and grace, growth and grace.
Yes.
And as our friend Suzanne talked about yesterday, when we were with her learning more about the Enneagram, if you don't name it, you can't do anything about it.
Yes.
And so we're going to talk about the harder things too. So hang in there. 4's can be self-absorbed. And when you are, there's not a lot of room for anybody else. It's easy to have the perception, like the song that David quoted a minute ago, that you're alone and abandoned. And in that, you can take a kernel of truth and make it a bigger story.
4 sometimes don't allow people the right to fulfill their needs because they have such a specific way of wanting it. And as a result of that, I've heard Suzanne talk about how 4s can get stuck in what's called a push and a pull. So they're wanting us to respond to something, then they're pulling away if we don't respond in the exact same way. So watch for that trap that I think 4s can step into.
4s, out of that great desire for authenticity, I think there's this sense of wanting to be unique that when we move to more unhealthy places can get kind of over the top. You don't have to be the most unique person in the room to be different. And I think in that, just like we talked about it a second ago, that story that you tell is really important. I have a friend who said, as a 4, it's like we're always in the wrong line. You know that sense?
Wow.
I think about Disney World being in line to get food and all the other lines around you are moving faster than your line. I think it's so easy to feel that way. And I'm not enough if my line's not moving the fastest and I'm not the most unique. And so I think it's really important not to let that desire for uniqueness run amok, because it's easy then for feelings to get mixed into it, and feelings can become how you start to feel unique as well. And out of that, when it gets over the top, it's easy to become deliberately inconsolable, which is not who you want to be when you back up off of that. But I think the feelings get mixed up in identity and authenticity, and so it can skew that direction.
Okay, 4s, stay with me on this challenge because I think it can be a little hard to hear but important to talk about. I think 4s can struggle in the mundane, the everyday of life. Things like laundry, going to the grocery store, mowing the yard can feel extra burdensome because they aren't romantic tasks. They aren't things that we can infuse a lot of beauty or fantasy into at times. And so I've heard our friend Suzanne challenge 4s to pick a day to go to the grocery store, Thursdays at 10 a.m., and go every Thursday at 10 a.m. Otherwise, you could be waiting until just the right moment. And then I've heard her laughingly say, and it's okay to go to the normal grocery store. You don't have to always go to Whole Foods, where the produce is especially beautiful and the flowers are even more extraordinary, because that temptation could be there as well. And I would add to that, thinking about the moving forward, I want to talk about that for a second in the context of grief. To say it is possible, we would argue it's even healthy to experience grief, all the feelings, all of what comes with that, and to move forward. Both and. When the temptation could be really strong to just stay in the grief and go deeper in the grief and go deeper in the grief and go deeper in the grief, and that there's not forward movement. So please hear the both and in that, not the one or the other. And because you have the capacity to be with others, as Sissy talked about, you can sit with people for long periods of time in pain in extraordinary ways. Guess what? You can do that in your own life. You have that capacity.
That's good. So part of a 4's journey is to know that you are lovable and that you are enough without putting on all these extra things, that just who you are is lovable and enough. And it can be really helpful for your creativity to be focused outward rather than inward, which is an interesting thing that John and Kendra talk about as well, that they had beautiful outlets that made such a difference for them when they were growing up. Because when you focus outward, you're looking for the uniqueness and specialness, if that's a word, in others rather than just trying to find it in yourself.
4s, we've been talking a lot about how you feel things deeply, how you can sit with people and feelings. And something that I learned from Suzanne a lot of years ago that stopped me in my tracks is that 4s experience as many emotions as 1s experience critical thoughts. And I remember hearing that as a 1 and thinking about the number of critical thoughts I experience, not just in a day, in an hour sometimes, and thinking, what would it feel like to be bombarded by that many emotions? And so I want you to hear 2 1s having a lot of empathy for you to have to carry something that's significant. And what Sissy and I would want to say to you is that it can be difficult for 4s to even know what feeling to grab hold of because there are so many. And it can be difficult for 4s to remember that most emotions don't last for a very long period of time. And if we just allow them to come in and go out, we can move forward differently as opposed to that emotion pinning you to the floor.
Okay, let's talk about strengths as parents, 4's, because you have so many. And the first thing I would say is your capacity to listen, to sit with and listen to the kids that you love. I think about us as ones. I still remember my sister when she was probably 3 and I was 19 and pulling into the driveway in the car and this was before she could say Sissy, and she called me at this stage Thithy because she had a really great lisp. And her saying to me, Thithy, why are you always in such a hurry? And 4's, I don't think any of us get that sense from you, especially kids. And in this day and time when we are overscheduled and causing more anxiety because of it, that gift of sitting with them and hearing them is immense in the life of a child. So that's number one. Number two, you're not just sitting with them, but you're attuned to them emotionally. And research tells us that attunement is one of the best predictors of self-regulation in kids. And so when your child is starting to get frustrated and you can, with all the empathy that is so inside of you, look at them and say, hey, buddy, I can tell you're having a hard time. I can tell you're feeling really frustrated. Let's take 3 deep breaths together. And I want you to tell me more about what you're feeling. You have so much capacity to make them feel seen and heard and understood in ways that so many other numbers on the Enneagram don't have the capacity to reach. And so lean into that. They need you to do that. Now, it's going to get harder when they're teenagers and aren't in that stage. But in the meantime, before you get there, I want you to really lean in. And as they get older, we're going to shift to number 3. And I want you to go back and listen to episode 94 of this podcast called Giving Up Parental Control with our dear friends, Betsy and Jean Cashman. And Jean is a male 4 who was raised by, I can't remember if his mom was a 4 or not now, but what I remember is he talked about how they used to take walks together. And now as an adolescent, adolescent tip always is side by side rather than eyeball to eyeball. So anytime you can go out and walk, hike, move, it's really helpful with teenagers. And they would go on these walks and she would say, wow, did you see the clouds today? Or wow, look at that tree changing colors. And he talked about that he learned to appreciate beauty on those walks with his mom. And as a 4, you have a unique ability to slow down and see and appreciate and draw all of us into beauty. And so your kids need that. Again, we're not seeing the clouds today. We're moving too fast and we miss it. And so helping them see those things is a gift that you have that will bring more wonder and joy and gratitude in their lives too.
It's incredible. Can I talk about some potential struggles for 4 parents?
Yes.
Out of your gifts that Sissy just described so well, I think it's easy for 4 parents to over-attach to their kids' feelings or over-attach to their kids' experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it sets the stage for the second thing, which I think could be a trap, which is lingering. And we have a dear friend who is the head of a middle school here in Nashville. And at parent night at the beginning of every school year, she will challenge parents by saying, okay, parents, I want to encourage you to remember what's going on developmentally for these kids. And they're going to report some kind of frustration in a friendship to you and be all kinds of worked up about it 1 minute and then over it the second. And you have a tendency to get stuck in that. You're lingering with it. They've already moved forward and you're swimming in quicksand. So we want to think about that for parents in particular and how intuitive it is, again, out of the strength side of what's so true about you and your capacity to sit with your kids in hard moments. But the moving forward you want to challenge them to do, you want to challenge yourself to do as well. And that's a great lead in into the third thing, which is we talk a lot about the equation of support and challenge and equal parts of both. And in our experience, I think we intuitively as parents bend a little more toward one side or the other. Like I think as a one, I'm pretty great at challenging my kids, not always so great at supporting, sitting still and just listening. And I think 4's, you're Olympic gold medalist at sitting with kids. Like the support piece, I don't know any other number parent who could outperform you in that place. And so I want to challenge you to develop the challenge side of the equation. I want you to think about what it would look like to do the moving forward. And I had a great experience, though I was not a 4. I think the fact that we share a line as ones with 4's, when I go to the low side of 4, my wife jokingly said to me one time, could we stop off at deep sadness before we go to despair? Like I just spiral. And I had a moment of doing that in college. I had dated a girl for 2.5 years and we broke up. And I came home for Christmas break and announced to my parents that maybe I shouldn't go back to school and just stay home for a semester. I had no plan of what I was going to do. And I absolutely did not need to stay home. I needed to go back and see her on campus and figure out life after that. And so my parents did a lot of great listening to my plan of action to stay home and do nothing. And then my dad said, I can tell you're really struggling. I can't imagine how hard it is to break up with someone that you cared so much about after 2.5 years. And you're not going to stay home. So we can talk on the phone as often as that would feel helpful, but you are heading back. And I think that memory of equal parts of both, there was just a lot of great listening alongside the very challenge I needed that I couldn't have found my way to on my own. So how about some growth for 4's?
Well, I want to share a verse that I think is a beautiful verse for 4's to remember. And so go back and look this up in the Message. It is Galatians 6, 4 and 5. And write it in your beautiful script and put it on your mirror in your bathroom. It says, make a careful exploration of who you are and the work you have been given. And then sink yourself into that. Don't be impressed with yourself. Don't compare yourself with others. Each of you must take responsibility for doing the creative best you can with your own life. And we're going to come back to this, but one of the facets of the Enneagram that I'm learning about the most and that I don't know as much about is about how we all have these 3 centers of intelligence and they're doing thinking and feeling, and 4's are doing repressed.
Yes.
That they're feeling, that they're thinking about what they're feeling about what they're thinking, but it's hard to move toward doing. And we're going to come back to this idea specifically for girls in just a minute. But I love that this verse is not only saying don't compare, because that's what it's easy to lean towards, but it's saying make a careful exploration, so think and feel, and the work you have been given. And then sink yourself into that, the work you've been given. Don't be impressed with yourself. Don't compare yourself with others. Each of you must take responsibility, moving outward for doing, literally that's in there, the creative best you can with your life. It still gets to be creative. The creative best you can with your own life.
That is so good. Oh, I love that.
Tell us a mantra.
Okay. Thinking about a mantra. This connects back to remembering feelings come in and feelings go out. There is research that supports that most feelings last 90 seconds. Did you hear that? Not 90 minutes, 90 seconds. So I'd love for you to say that back to yourself as often as possible, particularly when it feels overwhelming and expansive and so many things. Most feelings last 90 seconds.
Let's talk about 3 things we want for every 4 parent.
I love that.
You want to start us off?
I will. So the first thing is you'll want to connect emotionally and know your kids deeply, and that's incredible. You will also want people around your kids to be authentic and to do the exact same thing. And not every teacher is going to do that in the exact same way. Not every friend, not every coach, not all the other peers and adults around your child are going to operate in the same way. And that's okay. That's okay. And that may feel really hard for you. And If you have a teenage daughter, I hope to goodness by now you've bought a copy of Brave by my dear friend Sissy Goff. If you've not, here's another reminder for you. And of the many things I love, you have a list in Brave of reminders for girls, one of which is there is not a perfect friend. There's not a perfect teacher. There's not a perfect coach. There's not a perfect boyfriend. Like, those are great reminders, I think, for parents, for you to give yourselves on behalf of the kids when you might be valuing or expecting that for a kid that you love. That's just not possible.
Number 2, I want you to be aware of confusing what they see with what they experience. And we can't change how we see the world. As Suzanne says, how we see the world comes through our Enneagram number. And so it is going to feel like they are sometimes even going to see that the other lines are moving faster. Things are going to get bigger, inflated. I have had so many 4's tell me stories that, like David talked about, were based on a small kernel of truth that then felt like a whole truth. And I asked a friend about it. We have a mutual friend who's a 4, and I said, tell me about this, because it's hard to counsel a 4 because our job is to believe what someone is telling us. And we can go down this rabbit trail of believing what they see rather than what they experience. And because feelings are somewhere between and all over it. And she said, oh, Sissy, I inflate things with emotion so much that I have learned before I send a text, I have to reread it to see if it's just based on my feelings or if it's true too. And she said, I can't tell you how often I have to back up a text and re-say it. Now, kids are not aware of that yet. And so they're going to say things like, no one talks to me at school anymore. Everyone leaves me out. Always when people talk in those big generalities, we want to pay attention. But I have had the same experience multiple times with 4's where I've had them in group counseling and the parent has called me and said, my daughter doesn't want to be in group anymore because no one likes her. Everyone talks to everyone else when they come in. They don't talk to her. It is literally, I could give you a script for this conversation. And I will often, there's a first pass where I'll say, well, that's not been my experience. Let me pay a little more attention. I'm wondering if that's just her perspective and what she's seeing as a 4. But let me pay more attention to that. And we'll circle back a couple weeks later and say, that they are talking to her. I think sometimes it feels like this has happened, or maybe somebody's got something specifically going on, so it's leaning more towards that person. Basically, it's what it feels like and what she's seeing. And every single time the parents pulled them from group. Every single time the parent has pulled her from group. And so if you suspect that you're raising a 4, I want you to really listen. I want you to really hear them as much as you can. Try to help them feel understood. Although I want to say, Kendra and John both said they never felt understood by their parents. And I think it can be part of what they almost feel like they need is to say, you don't understand me. Wow. And so use a lot of reflective listening. I really hear that you feel blah, blah, blah. And when they say, I have no friends, no one likes me, everyone's paying more attention to, then I want you to teach them about the Enneagram or talk to them about perspective and truth. And sometimes, and feelings and truth. And that idea of we want to be in charge of our feelings rather than our feelings being in charge of us. Because that is the primary hurdle that I think I hear about where parents sometimes inadvertently do kids a disservice who are 4's.
Wow, that's a good reminder. Okay, can I throw out one more reminder?
Yes, please.
We want every 4 parent to consider. You may have to work to meet the practical needs in addition to the emotional. As we're discussing, you are intuitively not just going to meet those needs emotionally, you're going to be an Olympic gold medalist in that space. The practical is likely going to be harder. And we talked about it with laundry in the grocery store. I want you to also think about the practical of structure and routine, of allowance and chores, of expectations and boundaries. Like, those things are not all that romantic or fun sometimes, and they're mundane, and they're needed and necessary. They're so helpful. Boundaries create security for kids. We say it all the time. And kids thrive in structure and sameness. So I want you to think about what you need to do to remind yourself of how good and important those are for kids when they don't feel intuitive or enjoyable for you as a parent. Can we talk about some unique differences with boys and girls?
Yes.
Because this felt like a number we needed to splinter off.
Okay, number one, just like we're talking about, I want you to give her opportunities and outlets for her emotions. I want you to hear them with discernment, but give her opportunities and outlets for her emotion. And you all, I want you to listen, especially if you have a harder time sitting in your own feelings. I want you to listen longer than you feel comfortable. And I want you to let her swim around in those feelings longer than you feel comfortable. And what my experience is that I typically, as a one, try to move 4s out of their feelings too fast. I don't sit there long enough. And y'all, I am completely telling on myself as a therapist. I have a clock that sits next to the person I'm counseling. When I'm meeting with a 4, and I start to feel something rise up in me like, okay, let's help them move towards some purpose. Let's help them move towards some productive thinking about what do you want to do? How do you want to move through this feeling? I make myself sit there 10 more minutes and just let them talk. Because the reality is they need to stay there longer than I do. And I don't think they feel heard unless I'll go there with them. So that's number one. Number two, don't get on the roller coaster with her. And she's going to try and drag you onto that roller coaster. One of my favorite quotes ever from a 4. So this girl got in an argument with her mom. They went to separate rooms. She slid a note under her mom's door and she said, "I'm going to my room. I want you to knock. I may not answer." And I do think 4s have a sense of sometimes wanting to create a lot of emotion. And then, like David said, in the push-pull, wanting to retreat and us to feel like we have to follow them there, which is really manipulative. So in that, rather than getting all worked up in general about whatever's going on with them, because like David talked about, we can linger longer and have bigger emotions sometimes. But in those moments, they need you to be steady and calm and not take the bait. And it is good for her to work through her emotions and then come out of her room and then engage. And so we need to be aware of not jumping on the emotional roller coaster with her because we want her. And I would say even we want to help reinforce in her and encourage in her when she is thinking, when she's problem solving, when she's having adventures, that we're not just seeing her for all of her big feelings because she's much more than that. And she can start to identify herself solely based on those feelings. And I think when we jump on the train and follow her because of the note or engage in the really big emotions and feel the same within ourselves, I think we're starting to help her identify predominantly by those feelings. And number 3, as we're thinking about them not living so much in the doing part of their intelligence, I have experienced that girls are at their best who are 4s when they have a sense of purpose. And they have so much empathy, so much awareness. I think 4s you all can make such a profound difference in the world. And so can she. And so what does it look like to help say things as we listen longer than we feel comfortable, then to say, what do you want to do with that? You have so much empathy for that person. Or, wow, you see so many things that I don't see. What do you think would help? How can you help others out of that? How can you find a sense of purpose? How can you take so much passion that you have about what's going on in your school that doesn't feel right and do something about it? Because I believe you can. Helping move them toward purpose.
So good. All right. Can I talk about a couple of things to consider if
Please
you
do.
could be raising a 4 boy? First thing is, Sissy and I learned, and this is really important to note, that 4s and 7s as kids often look identical. They want more. They never have enough. To Sissy's point, no one really understands what they need. They both often will cry when it's time to leave a play date or spend the night, which I think many kids of many numbers could, but it might feel a little bit deeper and overwhelming for different reasons. 4s, because the experience may have felt so rich and powerful. 7s, they don't want to stop having fun, but they can be mistaken for one another. So hold that open as you're studying kids to that possibility of could be a 4, could be some 7 tendencies I'm seeing. Second thing, I want to go back to the challenge I gave you as parents of developing equal parts of support and challenge. I think that is of such importance for 4 boys because it was so interesting to hear you tell that story about how often those parents had pulled their daughters out of group. I would argue, and I wonder if you had this be the case individually, I would argue that I think I've been fired by more 4 boys over the years than maybe any other number.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think those parents have bought into the same thing because I think their communication is probably, David doesn't really understand me. David's not really hearing me. And I think because, as I said earlier, I'm pretty good at challenge and working on being better at support. They didn't like the challenge. And feels appropriate that in our 4 episode, I might throw in one more song lyric. Don't you think that's
I think you
doable for the
should.
4s?
Yes.
To that point, I heard a song. Kelsey Ballerini, who's a country artist, has a song called Patterns. And one of the line is, maybe more than I like healing, I like the feeling of the feeling.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think that's within the support and challenge a lot of what I think was going on. And they weren't really interested that I was wanting to help move them toward healing. We just wanted to sit in the feelings. And I think that's so important to note because I think within that, what can be true for a lot of 4 boys is that melancholy is a bit of a default setting. Every 4 boy I've ever counseled had a real moody side to him.
Girls too.
And I think that's important to note that that's instinctive and intuitive. And I had a hilarious conversation with my wife recently, who's an elementary school teacher, and she was telling me about my wife's studied the Enneagram a lot, and it's really helped her in the educational setting in imagining possibilities of what numbers kids might be and how they respond to the world. And there was a 5th grade assignment at her school to write a personal narrative. So that was all they were given, was just, you get to pick a story and you're going to write about it. And she would say a third of the stories were kids writing about a trip to Disney. Third of the stories were about a vacation or Christmas Day. And she has one girl who's a 5th grade student that she's had some strong suspicions was a 4, and she chose to write about the saddest day. That was the title of hers, The Saddest Day. So that she intuitively first thought, that's what I most want to write about, when most people were writing about a trip or Christmas Day or vacation. So that's important to consider if you were seeing kids lean a little more in that direction, which I would say leads me to my last thought on young men who might be 4s. And that would be this. In my experience, and I bet this has been true for you, all kids in adolescence often try on a lot of identities. It's what we call an identity formation stage of development. It's very normal. They're trying to figure out who they are in the world. In my experience, adolescent boys who I sense could be 4s go to far extremes in the experimentation of identities. And I think about a sophomore boy I saw years ago who 1 month came in dressed in vineyard vines, and he had on moccasins. And 2 months later, he came in camo and cowboy boots. And then 2 months later, it was like not a little bit of a switch, not a slight modification. Like I almost didn't recognize him in the waiting room. He looked so different. And so think on that. I had a 6th grade boy who came in and told me he was really into Russian poetry, which I don't see a lot of middle school boys who are into Russian poetry, but if that's your thing, awesome. And then he announced to me 2 months later that he wanted to get a pet. I said, "What are you thinking about?" And he said, "A rare salamander," which he did end up getting. And then a couple of months later told me that he was into the Beatles and got really fixated on all their music, which, what a great band to research and explore, and then was into gardening 2 months after that.
Wow.
And so the jumping around to a lot of places that might feel more extreme, I want you to pay attention to the possibility of where those jumps might be a little bit bigger with 4 boys. So, even as I say that, I want to be very careful, even as I'm laughing and saying some of those things, that we aren't poking fun at these evolving kids. We're paying the right amount of attention to these things that could be traps that they step into. But these individuals experience a lot of complexities. And I think that's so important to remember. Complexity of emotion, complexity of how they see the world, complexity of how they move through the world, complexity of their experience.
And they experience a lot of shame.
They do. And that feels so important to note. So even when some of those complexities or extremes might show up, we would never be serving them well by doing a lot of eye rolling or dismissing of their experience. So I want you to think about what it would look like as we talk again about the support and challenge to really camp out in both of those places well, and what it might, as you're hearing this, if you're sensing, golly, I think I might have a 4 daughter, I think I might have a son who's moving in the direction of that number, to really develop whichever side you lean a little bit more toward, the other side, so that you can offer equal parts to these amazing kids.
David, what a team we have that we get to call friends who help make this podcast possible. Chris Starrett, our engineer.
Our management team at KCH.
And we are thrilled to be a part of the That Sounds Fun network.
Our music was created by the insanely talented Dave Haywood of Lady A.
And if this podcast felt helpful to you, please consider subscribing, liking, sharing, all the things.
We are grateful for you and cheering you on always.